In today's economy, every ad dollar counts. That's why performance marketers are turning to rocked ads to reach high intent customers in the transaction moment when they're completing a purchase online. Powered by AI and first party data, Rocked Ads connects your brand with over 400 million monthly global shoppers, and you only pay when customers engage. Learn more at rocked.com/adage. That's ROKT.com/adage.
We need the U.S. to rock and roll again. That's how Nissan America's chairman Christian Munier recently described the task at hand for the Japanese automaker, which is trying to overcome a sales slump amid significant industry challenges. Hello, my name is EJ Schultz, news editor at AdAge, and our guest on this week's Marketer's Brief podcast is playing a big role in trying to get Nissan back on track. Allyson Witherspoon late last year returned to the US to take on the top marketing job here. It's a role she knows pretty well. She held the job previously before moving to Japan in 2023 to lead global marketing. On the podcast, Allyson discusses how she's going about the job this time around. We talk about how the new automotive tariffs are affecting marketing, how Nissan is selling EVs, and much more. Plus, Allyson talks about how she dealt with burnout as she balanced both the US and global jobs for a time when she first moved back. And now, my conversation with Allyson. Hi, Allyson. Welcome to the Marketer's Brief podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
So last time you were on this podcast, it was 2019. At that time, you were settling into a role leading US marketing. And I guess it's a little bit of deja vu because you're in that similar position today, but a lot has happened in between, including a stint where you were in Japan overseeing global marketing. Can you explain why you are back in the US now?
Yeah, I know that is kind of interesting then too, like definitely a 6-year parallel. I mean, I think the biggest thing is Nissan's been going through a big turnaround plan. And as part of that, there's been a focus on making sure that we have the right resources in the regions where we need them, and also an overall decentralization and making sure essentially that the regions have, the power and the talent to be able to perform. So I spent the last 2 years in Japan in a global marketing role. And I just through the turnaround plan, they asked me to come back and lead the US marketing because I think that is where the biggest growth driver is going to be from a volume standpoint as well as from a profitability standpoint. And it was really critical that we make sure and have the US market leading and back on track. So that's why I'm back and I'm excited to be here. I still have some of my global market brand and marketing responsibilities, so I have a little bit of a dual hat, but overall I'm mostly focused on the US.
So I want to get into the US plan in a moment, but since you mentioned the dual role, I know you have a customer habit of being pretty candid on LinkedIn. And I know you've published, I believe you publish a regular feature called Outside the Comfort Zone.
Yes.
And you recently wrote about your experience juggling two jobs, US and global, and you had said that you burned out pretty quickly. Can you just, for the other marketers out there listening to this who have probably been put in similar positions or may have been, can you explain that experience and sort of how you navigated your way to the other side?
Yeah. And I think there were a few things that were happening at the time. We weren't quite in turnaround mode yet, and we hadn't fully finalized it. We've since then we've had, a pretty major management change and a leadership change at the top with our global CEO. But I was asked to do both jobs and actually both for professional because of the large market that is the US, as well as personal and for family reasons here. We came back and I wanted to do both jobs out of the US. So that's what we did. I mean, I think the challenging thing is when you're dealing with overseas markets, and particularly Asia, the time zone, it's 15 hours apart. So I had a full day job and then a full night job. And so that's how it was, that you can get to burnout very quickly. And I think what I learned in that process is, I was able to be hyper focused on where I really needed to spend attention. And it wasn't on ceremonial things. It was really around key decisions that needed to be made with my team in Japan. And then I think it's just also setting boundaries of, kind of making sure that I can sleep. The team that supports me were very helpful. And if I had meetings that went until 6 a.m. in the morning, that had a later start the next day and things like that. So it was challenging. If I'm being totally honest and in the spirit of candor, I think I'm just now starting to physically recover from it because it definitely took a toll on my health. It took which I don't think I realized as I was going through it, but now that I've been a couple of months out of it, I definitely have noticed that.
We see a lot of CMOs and other executives taking more to LinkedIn to kind of share these personal experiences. I know you've been doing it for a while. Can you describe what you get out of that and what your advice to others listening might be when it comes to this kind of thing?
Yeah, I think when I first started doing it, it was more about catharsis, and it was, sometimes when you're in these roles and as an executive, you don't always get a chance to kind of express yourself creatively. Obviously, I do that, for the brand and for Nissan, but sometimes I don't get as much of a chance to do it personally. And so it started first just as writing, and I, was just kind of putting pen to paper, or in my case, on the keyboard, and I just started kind of writing these articles. And I think it was just to kind of get it out there. And then I started to see the reaction and the response that people had to it. And that was really motivating. There was one that I had, and it had to do with mental health. And I had posted something and then I had immediately taken it down because it was very vulnerable. And I was being very vulnerable. And I think our corporate communications team, they're amazing. And they, kind of immediately reach out and they're like, you should post that, and here's just another way to kind of frame it up. And so I posted it, and again, and it was, just again the response that I received from it. So that's why I wanted to keep going. And then, there's always things in my mind. I have kind of my own content strategy for it. But it's a creative outlet for me. People seem to connect with it. And it's also just a way to try to be more personal, which I'm not sure. I didn't see a lot of that when I was coming up from executives, of kind of the more personal side. And I want to try to represent, we're human beings.
I think that's good advice for sure. I want to get into a little bit to your US strategy in a moment,
Yeah.
but I want to take a quick break for a word from our sponsor.
In today's economy, every ad dollar counts. That's why performance marketers are turning to rocked ads to reach high intent customers in the transaction moment when they're completing a purchase online. Powered by AI and first party data, Rocked Ads connects your brand with over 400 million monthly global shoppers, and you only pay when customers engage. Learn more at rocked.com/adage. That's ROKT.com/adage.
Okay, we're back with Allyson Witherspoon. Allyson, you've alluded to this earlier in our conversation, but I don't think it's been a secret. These have been some tough times at Nissan in the last couple of
Yeah.
years.
Yeah,
The company
definitely.
recently reported its steepest yearly financial loss in a quarter century. I think US retail sales increased 3.3% for the year ending March 31st, but that's still off your highs of 5 years ago. So as you're now back in the US, what's number one on your agenda of getting Nissan back on track? I think your America's chairman, Christian Mounier, recently told Automotive News, we need to US to rock and roll again. So how is marketing going to help?
Yeah, marketing is a key part of that, of getting us back to rocking and rolling. And I think the biggest thing is to get on the consideration set. And that's a heavy part. Product obviously is a big driver of it, but so is marketing. And so for me, it's about, starting to get back on the consideration set, starting to change some of the perceptions that we've seen over the last few years that have been gaps versus where we've been in the past, and maybe even to our competitive set. So really setting out about addressing the perception gaps that exist out there and confronting those and getting on the consideration set again.
So how do people perceive Nissan right now, and how would you like to shift that specifically?
Yeah, I mean, overall, Nissan is it's a very well-known brand, so there's high awareness. There are perception gaps around our quality, durability, reliability, and I think some of that goes back to several years ago, almost 10 years ago, where we did have some challenges from a quality standpoint, and I think some of those are still plaguing us. And even when you see in social media, they tend to come up and tend to escalate the conversation. And I think over the course of that, and obviously there are many decisions going into some of the things that happened in the past, which is no longer the case. And so people don't perceive our products to be very reliable, high quality, or durable. And that's what we really want to change because that may have been a kind of a narrow instance in the past, but what we're seeing, especially when you look at vehicle dependability, initial quality studies, Nissan scores very, very high, especially amongst the competitive set. And I don't think enough people know about that yet. And that's what we really want to try to overcome.
So how are you going to do that tactically? Is there already work in the market as an example of that, or what's coming up?
We're actually in the process of producing all of that now. We have a huge kind of content production that's happening this month. But when I first got back, the first thing I did was aligned with our head of engineering, which is based out of Detroit. His name is Chris Reed. He's amazing. And we went up there to visit he and his team and really get into the weeds on how we do all of our testing, all of the quality controls that the vehicles go through, how we go above and beyond what's typically done when it comes to durability testing and things like that. And so all of that just absolutely inspired us into these are stories that we need to be telling, and these are stories that consumers really, really appreciate. So we have a full campaign that's going to be rolling out. We have kind of a full platform that we're going to be focused on this quality, durability, reliability, and safety.
When will we start to see that roll out?
You'll start to see it mid-July.
Okay, so soon.
Soon. We work fast.
Does this involve a completely new look and feel, new tagline, anything you can share, little hints?
A little tease.
Yes.
I think it will not have a new tagline. We're actually not going to change the tagline right now. We have kind of the underpinnings of our brand strategy has changed, but it will have a new look and feel. It's going to be very bold, very edgy. We're going to show the extremes, extreme conditions, and again, working with our engineering team on what our vehicles go through, but showing them in a very extreme ways. And so it may look like it's movie making magic if we're dropping things out of helicopters into the bed of a Frontier, but it's actually real. So it's very real what we're going to be doing, and it's actually in production now. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a new look for us, but also maybe going back a little bit to our roots and being much more daring and edgier in how we go to market.
Of course, the biggest trick for all marketers these days is getting this message out in the right channels so it's noticed. How are you doing that?
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things is really finding people where we want to get on the consideration set, like I said, but we need to do that earlier. So I think if we're trying to kind of get on somebody that's looking 30 days out, that's much more of a price type messaging. So we want to be focusing on people who are maybe 3 to 6 months out and start to focus on it there. We're looking into key lifestyle pieces. And if it's in the case of the Frontier, that's more in kind of workhorse, heavy duty type of lifestyle. If it's as an example of the Rogue, maybe that's a little bit more family adventure, but wanting to have, a little bit something extra when they're going out on the weekends, as an example. And same thing for Pathfinder. So really focusing on where those audiences are going to be and how do we start to intercept them.
Are you doing a lot more on social influencers? Where are you finding the most
All of
successful?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of it. I think the other thing too is that we're really starting to focus on a lot of kind of series type content. So less 30-second TVCs, much more kind of 15-second series and even less. And starting to kind of have like this repetitive short messages that continues to kind of play out in different forms of media, but a lot of online video, a lot of social media.
And I know, are you still working with Omnicoms, Nissan
Yes.
United on this campaign? Do you feel good
Yes.
about that relationship? I know you've
Yes.
been together a while.
Yeah, so yeah, we've had Omnicom as our partner for several years, and Nissan United has been our agency of record. We just gone through kind of, as we've been going on this business turnaround as well as this brand turnaround. I'm really excited by having them as partners as part of that because they know our brand really well. They know what our strengths are. They also know what our challenges are, and we can have really open and transparent discussions about how we need to move the needle, which I appreciate.
And you're trying to achieve this while the company at large has a pretty aggressive cost-cutting program going on. The
Yeah.
figure I've seen reported is 2 billion. Are you being asked to do more with less in the marketing side of things also?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. And I think I think that's kind of any marketer that's going through it. I think, we're trying to do the same thing, especially in the middle of this turnaround. And so I think we completely threw out the old plan that we've had in the past and really started from scratch, which I think is a little bit rare. Usually there's some sort of lift and shift, but we looked across every property, every channel, everything, and looked at what is really going to be driving the most impact and then prioritized from there. And so I think, yes, it is, we're trying to do a lot in the middle of a cost cutting time, but it's also been a bit of a liberating experience to do that as well, because I don't feel as handcuffed to things that have maybe been more legacy and maybe not as high performing as we needed it to be.
So we can't have a conversation about automotive marketing these days and not ask you about tariffs and how that might be affecting your plans. I know you guys have had a campaign running for a little bit now. I believe playing up some of your own US manufacturing
Mhm.
and talking about pricing. Where are you on that journey? Is that message resonating? What do you
Yeah.
expect to have to do going forward on that?
Yeah, and I think something that was really interesting is that we kind of at the very end, middle to end of March, we saw this massive increase in people searching for Nissan pricing. And I think that was right around when the tariffs were announced that they would be, implemented in the beginning of April. And so we knew right away that we needed to kind of meet consumers where they were as they were looking for us. And so that's really what drove this "we're here" messaging around tariffs and what we have available. So a lot of it is being driven by how we capture people, whether they're searching, if it's an online video, and even in our tier two creative as well. So I think as people's perceptions and maybe questions about tariffs starts to evolve over time, we're going to see we will stay very on top of the data to understand what those trends are. And it's happening in real time.
The other topic I'm asking every automotive marketer these days is how you're balancing, internal combustion engine marketing versus EVs versus hybrids. I've seen a lot of automakers try to get all that messaging into one single ad now, promoting choice. Do you still see a place for pure EV marketing? I know you guys just actually, as we're recording this, just announced some more
Yep.
details on the upcoming Leaf. Will that get a whole dedicated campaign, for instance, for an EV, or do you just try to make this part of your broader communications?
It's a little bit of both. I think for Leaf, that will be a much more targeted campaign than maybe what we've done in the past. I think what we're really trying to do is focus on how do we capture EV intenders and how do we capture them where they are, and then looking for the other types of powertrain diversity. We are going to have a hybrid that's going to be coming out towards the end of this year, and then kind of an even more advanced hybrid system that will be coming out next year. So we're kind of laying the groundwork for hybrids to now and mainly leading into next year, but at the same time still focusing on Leaf, and that's an iconic model for us, but in a little bit more of a targeted approach. And then obviously we have a lot of ICE engines, so continue to support those.
Leaf, I believe it's one of the pioneers, right, of
Oh
EVs.
yeah, it was
When
the
was it?
first
Yeah.
mass produced EV in 2010. I think that's right, in 2010. But yeah, first mass produced EVs. And I think it was, and honestly, we're having a really good time with the positioning of the new product because it's gotten a glow up and it's very sophisticated, it's sleek, it's stylish. And I think, when the first Leaf came out, it was a little bit quirky. It definitely did not look like any of the other cars that were out there, which was unique to it. But I think as people's tastes have evolved and as EV technology has evolved, it's great to see how the Leaf has had this glow up.
Correct if I'm wrong. I don't think if you were coming out with an EV today with a new name, I don't think people would pick Leaf these days, right? Because the move has been to sort of present EVs as on par with, right, gas
Yeah.
powered vehicles. Leaf has a much different connotation. Is that a challenge for you guys with that name? Obviously, you're sticking with it. I'm just curious.
Yeah. I mean, I think with it, no, it's a good question, and we actually have this discussion a lot about naming and historical naming. I think we're still confident about Leaf. I think it still is iconic enough as an EV, and this is a pure EV, so I think we're confident with Leaf coming to market as a Leaf. I think some of the other models, again, it's a bit of a crystal ball and how we want to position them and name them, but overall, that is what we're seeing from consumers. It's not their expectations are something that is easy like ICE, it has power like an EV, and it's kind of low cost of maintenance, and that's what we want to deliver on. And so I think we're open to any type of naming, but with this model, it's the Leaf, and we're proud of it as the Leaf.
Last question before we run, like who is the key sweet spot target for EVs these days?
I would say the EV buyers right now are very pragmatic. They are kind of more advanced, but they're also very pragmatic. So they want ease of charging, they want ease of the overall experience in the car. They're just looking for simplicity. And so that's what we really feel like we've delivered with the all new Leaf. We're excited about it, and I think it's going to be spot on for what these EV intenders are looking for. And maybe even people that are ready to get out of their ICE engines.
Okay, Allyson, we'll have to leave it there. That was Allyson Witherspoon, CMO at Nissan. My name is EJ Schultz, news editor at Ad Age. I want to thank our producer, Lauren Ciardio, and invite everyone to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite channel. We will catch you next time.
Marketers Brief listeners get $40 off an adage.com subscription. Sharpen your marketing edge and visit adage.com/brief for your discount.